I'm glad to see you all on today's second video. I hope you liked the first one and appreciated it. Well, let's get started. Story 1 from user deleted. I was 45 years old. I made my weekly call to my mother, who then proceeded to tell me that she was having back surgery the next day, and none of my siblings were there to help her. This was not unusual, because she had already alienated my 3 siblings. It was a Friday night, so I hung up and booked the first flight I could to her city. It cost me $800 because of the last-minute booking. I take the red-eye Saturday morning and make it to the hospital about 2 hours before she is scheduled to go into surgery. I walk into the hospital room, and the first words out of her mouth are how terrible I look. Again, this is not unusual. My mother never has a nice word to say about anyone. During the week she is in the hospital, I am either there or at her house to help care for my disabled brother, not one of the 3 siblings from above. He got drunk and rolled his car off an embankment, resulting in brain damage 20 years previous to this. The accident that disabled him was his 6th major accident. For the other 5, he started having accidents as soon as he got his license. My mother always made an excuse. The tire blew out. Someone ran him off the road. The steering went out. My brother never drove a used car in his life. My parents got him a new car every other year or whenever he wrecked the old one. He could have had a life and recovered better from his accident, but my mother chose to keep him at home and helpless because she wanted his Social Security disability money. He was not required or allowed to take care of himself. She made his food, did his laundry, etc. He was kicked out of a health club she signed him up for because he exposed himself to people there. My mother claimed he just had trouble making it to the bathroom on time because of his meds, so he was peeing in a water fountain, not exposing himself. Like that made it okay. The day after my mother's surgery, I took my brother out to lunch. He drank a 32 Oz soda. Since I was aware of his incontinence problems, I asked him if he needed to use the restroom since we were going on a long drive. He said no. During the drive, I offered several times to stop so he could use the bathroom. Still, no. FYI, he was not wearing adult diapers. Between the time it took to eat lunch and the drive, it was 4 hours with him not using the restroom. He did use it when we got home. For the week my mother was in the hospital, she continued to berate me about my looks, my husband, etc. I was used to this and just tried to ignore it. The day before I had to leave to go back to work, I made sure my mother got put in rehab because if they had sent her home, she would have not followed the doctor's instructions. My brother could make himself food, etc. He just chose not to because he knew someone would do it for him. I'm at her house packing and making sure my brother had everything he needed until my mother got home. I arranged to have one of my siblings look in on him. I'm standing in the living room, talking to my husband on the phone. My brother gets up from the recliner he lives in, walks 4 feet to the sliding glass door, unzips his pants and pees onto the patio. WTF? I repeat. WT actually F? I yelled at him to go to the damn bathroom. He claimed he couldn't make it in time. I asked him why he didn't use the urinal next to his chair, and his response was that our mother let him pee on the patio, so why should I care? I tried talking to my mother about the situation. She again claimed he could not make it to the bathroom even after I told her about the long drive. I went home. The next time I spoke to her on the phone, I tried talking to her about him again. She responded by attacking my husband, telling me I should leave my husband because he just manipulated me, so I would do what he wanted. My husband is the most patient, kind man I have ever known. Also, I do what I want when I want. My husband is nothing but supportive, even when he doesn't like my choices. That was the last straw. I told her I could no longer stand by and let her piss all over my life when she had essentially ruined my brother's life by enabling him. That was 12 years ago, and I've never been happier. My sister now takes care of my brother, and she is kind, but no nonsense. Story 2 from user Scapity. My parents are very much divorced and hate each other, mostly due to my father's rampant alcoholism. At 17, I joined the army to be less of a burden on my mother, get some kind of a future going, and served active time, joined the Guard, and went to college, and got swept up into the ball of fun that happened after 9/11 with a few deployments. When I came home for the last time, I decided to reach out to my father, drove to his house, thought we could have a decent conversation for once since it was early, and he couldn't possibly be intoxicated before 10 a.m. I was wrong. First words out of his mouth was, "So how many ragheads did you get to kill?" I just looked at the ground and realized it was futile. A few years later, I met the girl of my dreams and got engaged. When I invited him to the wedding, no RSVP. I called him and asked if he got the invitation. He said he did. I asked him if he was going to come with my grandmother, and he said he wasn't, which means Grandma didn't have a ride. And when I asked why he wasn't coming, he told me, "Because we're not that close." I asked him how he expected to get closer to his son if he didn't want to come to my wedding or meet his new daughter, and he hung up. And that was it. To be fair, my father is also a veteran, and by all accounts, got a little scrambled in Vietnam. But I told him when and if he decides to sober himself up, I will be ready to pick up the phone. My new fear is that we are gearing up to attempt to have a kid, and my grandfathers both played such a huge element in my life that I don't quite understand what a childhood would be without one. But I remember being a young kid and being driven around by this guy who was beyond intoxicated, being beaten in public for no reason, being taken fishing, which was fun in the morning but got horrible after the drinking took effect. I fear that when and if we have a kid, he will actively want to be in the kid's life, and the kid will be exposed to all the evils that I was exposed to. Story 3 from user The Freeze 1. One I can actually answer. My mom and dad split when I was 3. My mom couldn't get a job, kept getting evicted, so my dad took my sister and we moved back to my birthplace, Germany. 5 years later, we moved back to the States, and I re-met my mom, who had remarried and had another kid. Throughout my youth, my sister and I were in constant back and forth custody battles. My mom barely able to afford anything because she had still never had a job, and my now ex-stepdad, who I love and still talk to often, was working as a kitchen manager for a restaurant. They had another child, bringing the count to 4. My mom was a lazy, never-working mom, who spent her days stuck to the phone until she learned about RuneScape, then subsequently World of Warcraft. By this time, I was like 16 and living with my dad, so I chose not to go over often. She ended up moving into the basement, her bed right next to the computer. Where she would wake up, play whatever games, then roll back into bed, roll literally by this point. My brothers were like 6 and 10. They were in a private school, poverty scholarship. And my stepdad had moved to working in the interior redesigning field, including like building walls, painting inside, outside, bunch of hard work. This is relevant because he would leave for work by 7 a.m. and get back by 7 p.m. He supervised, so when the kids weren't in school, they were free to run amok. My brothers had rotten teeth. One had a speech impediment from lack of being pushed to read in school, not a birth or LD. One day I dropped by. I don't remember why, but I did. The kids were sitting in the living room in their school clothes, which were stained all over, holes in the pants, ECT, ect. I asked the older of the two what the hell was going on, and he said, "Mom is on strike." Mom is on strike. What the trash? I went downstairs and felt like a parent talking to a 12-year-old who wouldn't listen. I did 2 loads of laundry for the kids and left. I called my stepdad. He was crying because he was just so exhausted when he got home, and he felt like it wasn't even a home anymore. She had begun talking with these dudes online from her games and said she no longer loved my stepdad. This was also going on, and I hadn't known. My stepdad ended up finding a lady willing to rent him a house cheap if he would do work on it. That way, he was still paying bills for my cunt mother, and of course, taking care of the boys. I had gotten laid off by this point and needed a place to stay for a couple months. I went to my mom's, and I hadn't been there in a couple years. The house was wrecked, dog poop everywhere, dishes all over the place, ECT. It was basically at the point where it should have been condemned. I put my bed in the extra room. Realized the first day that the AC was broken, and it was June. Not just that, there was a fly infestation. It was bad. Very bad. I eventually moved out within like 2 months, and she was kicked out right after. They got an apartment, and I thought all was good now. Then she met a dude online who lived in DC. We live in NC. Eventually, like within a month, she dropped my brothers off at our great uncle's. Not relative, but growing up calling him uncle. And left for DC. Again, she had still not gotten a job, at all, since she was 22, now in her 40s. She left my brothers and bounced. Second time, she has done this to children. My stepdad found out a week later and went and got the boys. Except for my brother now being a 420 friendly 19-year-old skate kid who has not gotten a job, they've done much better. He did graduate, which surprised me. I wasn't sure if it would ever happen. My younger of the two brothers is a junior in high school, varsity wrestler, scholar, ECT. Doing really well. She still lives with this guy, still doesn't work. What makes me even more mad is how I would see her on my siblings' statuses saying things like, "I raised you right. I am so proud of you kids." And things to that nature, and my first thought was, trash, I raised me. She was very absentee even when I was a kid. Eventually, she would try to make it a huge spectacle when she would come into town. No one cared, except my youngest brother, but he was a mama's boy. 2 years ago, I bought them both phones for Christmas to replace the old trash ones they had on the guy in DC's plan. I didn't cancel their lines. I paid full price so they could have them on their current service. She got pissed, threatened my brothers with unwise trash, said some trash to me, and I went off. I blew the up and told her I never wanted to hear from her trash back ever again. She tried to contact me to this day, but it's been over a year and I have stood my ground on resolve. She is not a mother. She never was and never will be. She is pathetic and the dirt beneath my shoes. Maybe she'll grow up one day and become a mom, but even then I don't see resolve from my end. I'm sure I can go on and on about other reasons, or why it took me so many years to finally tell her enough is enough. But I did, and I feel great about it. Story 4 from user Xe.Xe. When they arrived at my front door, completely unannounced. Might seem pretty minor until you consider that I live in the USA and my parents live in the UK. They came all the way over here on a last-minute flight because they assumed the reason I was reluctant to talk to them, at the time, was because my spouse was stopping me. There's not really any juicy backstory to this. My parents aren't addicts or hoarders. They're not vulgar predators or violent drunks. They're just really trash people. They raised me in such a controlling and manipulative way that they never expected me to be able to live outside their influence, and they've never been able to accept that I'm another person and not just an extension of themselves. They think the reason I don't talk to them anymore is because I like hurting them. Not because I couldn't stand their constant chipping away at my self-esteem, drilling into me that love and success meant total obedience and total submission to others, without questioning and without thinking of my own needs. But yeah, the overall reason, I guess, is because it just doesn't occur to them that anything they did was wrong. To them, abuse only ever means broken bones or inappropriate touching. And having them jump me like that, in such a way and at such cost to them that I'd have no choice but to let them in, was the last straw. Thanks to everyone who was here today. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.